I will lead with what I think is most important today, which is that I'm a proud member of the organizing committee, but I also am the CEO of Africa Business Group. I'll be your program director for the morning, and I'm pleased to welcome you all to the launch of the U.S. Business Awards in Africa, celebrating excellence, creating knowledge. We've been following this journey to get to today, and today is really the formal commencement of the beginning of the exercise, because we will be having the awards next August for a bit over a year. But we're very pleased and quite excited by the response that we've gotten from stakeholders in the corporate sector, in the U.S. government, and in general around the continent. We're excited because this is an idea that one might have thought would have been done quite some time ago, because there's been a U.S. corporate presence in Africa for over 100 years. So we're pleased, though, that we had COVID, in a sense, to inspire us, because there was a period at the beginning of COVID when there was what I call PPD diplomacy, where people were taking pictures of all that they were doing to support the prevention of COVID in Africa, and we thought, but there's U.S. companies that are doing things and we don't see them. How do we elevate their role? And a group got together under the auspices of Access, and you'll hear more about the genesis in the presentations that are going to be given today. And we thought it would be really great if we could highlight the work of corporate America in Africa, and also capture it for many in the United States in particular, and other parts of the world, who just don't hear about this work. They don't get the full picture of all that U.S. business in Africa does to make the continent a better place. So we're very pleased this morning to have an illustrious panel of speakers who will share their thoughts and tell you all a bit more about this journey and all that we hope to do in the coming months. So I'd like to start our program with Professor Gilbert Khadiagala, who is the director of the African Center for the Study of the U.S. at the University of Wits.
My name is Gilbert Khadiagala. I'm the director of the Africa Center for the Study of the U.S. at the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg. So I thought I would just briefly welcome you by summarizing what the Africa Center for the Study of the United States does and is all about, before my colleague Bob Wekesa speaks more about why we are here today. The Africa Center for the Study of the United States was established in 2018 by the University of the Witwatersrand. And the objectives of the axis were fourfold. The first is to foster understanding and appreciation of the United States as a nation, as a global actor, and a society. Secondly, there's been very limited knowledge about the United States in Africa. So it was important that we set up a center that essentially systematically studies the United States, going to be very helpful to Africans and everybody who is interested in the United States. Three, our intention is to forge partnerships with African institutions, with African actors, alongside US institutions and US actors. Finally, the center was set up to, in fact, socialize, to train the next generation of Africans who are interested and knowledgeable about the US. So we started in 2018, and we are a very young institution, and we are growing, but I think we've set up the mission that we do want to be, at least for now, we are the only Africa Center for the Study of the U.S. in this part of the world. We were very glad from the outset to get funding. One of our funders, our local funders, Maurice, sitting in the audience and is on the advisory board of the center. He came up very frontally to help the center set up. And then we were very generously funded by the U.S. Embassy from inception, the U.S. Embassy in Pretoria. And then we got funding from the Ford Foundation office in Johannesburg. And finally, the Flora and William Hewlett Foundation of California has been very critical in funding our activities. Briefly, what have we been doing? We are within Wits, which is an academic institution. So part of our mandate is essentially to foster research and scholarly exchanges between African institutions and the US institutions. So that's the bigger mandate. The second activity we've been doing is to engage in forging of partnerships with a broad array of US institutions and, of course, African institutions interested in the US. And this program, therefore, fits very clearly in our mandate of fostering partnerships with US institutions. We started off by focusing largely on the area that I would define as public diplomacy, cities in the international relations. We've been looking at the role of the diaspora in U.S. Africa relations. But we've also been looking at issues such as culture and cultural exchanges between the U.S. and Africa. Very recently, we are also launching a program on the study of the U.S. We started last year with the elections. We had a whole web of events around understanding U.S. elections. So we think that is a very critical dimension in our entry into U.S. understanding of U.S. politics from this end. Now we are segueing into the economics and the business realm. And that's why we are here today launching the U.S. Business Awards, which Michael and Bob have been very instrumental. And there's a big group, I think they will introduce themselves as we keep going. There has been a very vibrant working group to set up this important event. So we are here, and Michael was correct. This is just the beginning. I think we have a big event next year. But I think we are excited that we are making a start in a very important area, that of the U.S. corporate presence in Africa. And so we are very excited that we are part of the whole organizational framework, and therefore I want to invite you here. I also want you to follow us on our website and our activities that we are doing. And I think on that note, I don't want to take too much time, and I thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you, Michael.
As we are focusing on the business community, we thought that it was critically important to get the Wits School of Business involved. And so I'd like to ask Mr. Maurice Radebe, who's the head and director of the University of Witwatersrand School of Business, to come and give his remarks. Thank you.
I bring greetings from the Wits University fraternity. Wits is a massive institution, and it's backing this initiative, particularly the Center for the Study of U.S. We as Wits Business School, my name is Maurice Radebe. I'm the head of the school, and I am fully behind this initiative. We are operating in the heartland of Africa's economic hub, and we believe we're leading in research, particularly in areas of critical and sustainable growth. During the pandemic, you would know that we led in the vaccine research as an institution, and any challenge that is facing Africa, that is our mission, to make sure that all challenges that are facing the continent, whether it's poverty, inequality, diseases, ignorance, even peace, is these issues we need to do. As WPS, from a business point of view, we play a significant role in equipping leaders of tomorrow and leaders of today by giving them skills and in making sure that they understand their role and the significance of their role in a continuously changing world. We at the business school are clear of our vision, firm, but as a leading business school, firmly embedded amongst the best in the world. We like to produce agile leaders in this world, and particularly ethical leaders. As you know, I don't need to remind you, in our country, corruption is so cancerous that if we're not careful, it's going to kill the body politic of our nation and in our continent. We would like to promote also critical thinking. That is why we're part of this initiative, because it is important to think critically, innovate, and more importantly, sustainability. There's Logan. Please come, Logan. Logan is our academic director. I've already introduced you. Good that you've finally come in. Please take a seat. Give him a round of applause. He's really worked very hard. And also, working with this initiative, we would like to produce cutting-edge research addressing the pressing challenges of our continent. I've already mentioned them. Through teaching, research, social engagement, Wits and Wits Business School, and the Center for Study of the U.S., we would like to play a critical role also in transforming South Africa and the continent. We know that Africa is attractive as an emerging market, as an investment opportunity, and it's got the youngest population. But we know that the pandemic has set us back quite seriously. We must admit that. The academic exacerbated the challenges that we have already, the challenges of poverty, challenges of health, poor management of our health system. All these things we need to play a role, and I believe this initiative, together collaboratively, we will be able to do that. The story of Africa Rising and Africa Open for Business, it is a story that we must make sure it happens. It not only is a story that is just being talked about in theoretical and journals and in academic papers, but it must be a story that becomes reality for the sake of our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. This promise must come to real. We believe that African countries are now favoring trade over aid. Let me pause there because this is very important. I've been a development practitioner for over 3 decades now. I've been involved with a lot of African aid organizations and roles and departments. And let's be honest and be robust about that. Aid created a dependency syndrome. And we just cannot afford to have that continuing with aid. And we need to reimagine and repurpose it. And therefore trade becomes important so that it becomes a mutually beneficial relationship and a mutually empowering relationship. Otherwise, the negative perceptions that continues in the continent around U.S. will continue. And therefore, it is our role to make sure that we promote trade, mutually beneficial trade, and particularly local empowerment, as well as local production and beneficiation and creation of jobs in our continent. The fact that the vaccine, for instance, has really created a vaccine diplomacy and vaccine politics is an issue that we need to tackle together as the university research it, together with the center and WBS. We're very keen to play a role there, play a pivotal role in redefining the U.S. Engagement in Africa and engage in robust discussion about redefining that, repurposing it, and making sure that it is a relationship that is mutually beneficial. As you know, that there's so many U.S. companies in Africa, and they've been here for many, many years. And some of us know them personally, some of them work with them, some of them we serve on their boards. And it's very important that we continuously ask ourselves, particularly American companies and US companies, are we in this day and age fulfilling the mandate that this continent needs? Obviously, successful diversification, expansion is required, and growth is required in order for economic opportunities to emerge and to create jobs. We need jobs desperately to make sure that we've got efficient value chains that are relevant to the continent. I mean, the value chains that we've been having over decades now are value chains which I call them from port to pit, from pit to port. So if it's an extractive industry, I've been in the energy industry for 3 decades, so I have a good sense of what I'm talking about. Once there is a hole there and you're digging, whatever you dig, whether it's gas, oil, or mine, it's there. Value chain is just take it out, extract it, and the value chains take it straight to port and then take it out and export. We cannot continue with that. We have to change that mindset. We have to change that model. We have to think about how we're going to beneficiate locally, how we're going to create jobs, how we're going to make sure that we all are winning. We at WPS are very proud of the fact that we're part of the association with this initiative. We feel honored. We think we can play a role because 45% of our academic staff right now, as I speak, 45% are from all over the continent. So we're a very diversified team of academics that got capacity and understanding of the continent. Therefore, production of knowledge in terms of research, of U.S. Africa business linkages, we are keen and to support that initiative. We have a team that have a good understanding of the emerging market. We've got people who are studying that, teaching that. We've got an MBA class that has got a module which is basically teaching students how to operate in Africa, how to do business in Africa, what are the challenges in Africa, what are the risks inherent in doing business in Africa, what are the attitudes, what is the approach, what is the ethical and cultural approaches that you need to understand when you're doing business in Africa. That module is there and we are keen to expand it. Understanding the geography and the sectoral location in the understanding the regulation policy, governance requirements in the continent. We teach this and we continue to develop knowledge and research on this. Developing scenarios, and we've got a case study center that is generating case studies, and we want to continue to write case studies. So that's what we, together with the Center for Africa's, for the U.S. Studies, we would like to expand that, and I believe we will be able to do that. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to conclude by really giving an applause to this initiative. I really congratulate you and particularly the organizing committee that has been working so hard to get it up and going, and then inviting the Wits Business School to come and become a partner in this. I can assure you we will be a partner. We will be all our hands on deck, and as the head of the school, I'm happy to commit our resources, our academic team, our postdoctoral student, our research capacity, and our case studies to support this initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maurice. At the heart of this whole initiative, it is meant to be a learning one, an educational one. So we appreciate your support. The other hallmark of this initiative is also partnership. We chose the Intra-African Trade Fair, the second, being held here in Durban, in large part because, yes, it is about fostering intra-African trade, but it's about also strengthening the relations with existing partners. And the U.S. has long been a very important partner with Africa. So we have the pleasure to have Mr. Todd P. Haskell, who is the Charge d'Affaires of the U.S. mission to South Africa, to share with us a bit this morning about his thoughts and the U.S. government's thoughts on the partnership perspective of this initiative as well. He's going to be joining us via video conference from Pretoria.
It's important to recognize that that they demonstrate respect for their workforce, they provide training, they manufacture quality products in a clean, safe, and secure environment, something that one cannot count on from every investor, but it is a priority for the United States. For America's most respected companies, profitability and doing the right thing go together. And this means adhering to the law, operating in an ethical manner, practicing transparency, and having accountability to customers, shareholders, and society. But it also means holding high internal standards and compliance with regulatory and safety requirements. So customers and employees can have confidence in the effectiveness and quality of U.S. products and services. Individual American companies, much like the American brand, are defined not just by their products and services, but by their strong business values and culture. And we look forward to seeing recognized for the contributions that they do make. In Washington, the Department of State recognizes efforts like this with the Award for Corporate Excellence, and jointly with USAID and the International Development Finance Corporation, the Millennium Challenge Corporation, the U.S. Department of Commerce, winners are selected based on nominations submitted by our chief submission from around the world. Winners are recognized during a ceremony in Washington by the Secretary of State, and to have that award that recognizes the contributions of U.S. companies for economic growth on the continent is a major accomplishment and a huge first. It's important to recognize that there are companies that are doing well by doing good and working in an environmentally and socially responsible manner aligned with economic growth agendas of our partner governments. Allow me just briefly to talk a little bit about the African Continental Free Trade Act area. The AFCFTA is creating a single continental market for 55 AU member states, and that's 1.3 billion people, with free movement of people and capital across economies with a combined GDP valued at $3.4 trillion. This will expand the inter-Africa commerce through better harmonization and coordination of members on trade and tariffs. It will remove tariffs on 90% of goods for inter-Africa trade. And as of last month, 38 of the 55 AU members have ratified the AFCFTA. Think about that. Implementation of the AFCFTA is very important to American companies, right? Because one of the impediments to US companies investing in Africa is that many countries have very small markets. And opening this up and creating one huge continental market will really increase the incentives for US companies to come into Africa. I know this. I served in Congo Brazzaville for several years, and it was hard to get US companies interested with such a small market. But if they knew they could base there and move goods around, the incentive to invest would be enormous. We're optimistic that more US companies will begin to see the benefits of doing business in Africa. We're also encouraged by recent trends around the removal of trade barriers and the ratification of the WTO's Trade Facilitation Agreement, which cuts trade costs, increases revenue, and creates transparency. We're not part of the AFCFTA, of course, but we do heartily support it. The US government believes in Africa, in the continent-wide spirit of entrepreneurship and innovation. Clearly, African entrepreneurship is as strong as it is anywhere in the world, and you only have to look at the experience of African immigrants in the United States, who are among our most successful immigrants. We know Africa plays an important role in the global economy with one of the fastest growing markets in the world. And the continent's young and rapidly urbanizing population is hungry to develop business opportunities. Through Prosper Africa, which is a US government interagency approach, we are strengthening our trade and investment ties with Africa. And we hope to contribute to the growth of environmentally sound and socially responsible economies. And as part of that effort, we're doubling down on our Prosper Africa initiative and engaging with small and medium enterprises across the US that are Africa diaspora, women, and minority-led. Throughout the intra-Africa free trade area, representatives of multiple US government agencies and initiatives, including commerce, agriculture, and state, and all of US African government leaders and members of the business community to better understand how we can further support efforts to advance economic growth. And separately, U.S. officials in Washington are meeting with your ambassadors and ministers to discuss partnerships with your governments, and will travel across the continent, to engage directly with business communities. In the coming year, we hope to explore new agreements with new partners and to strengthen engagement between our private sectors. And while we are making sure historically underserved communities are aware of both the opportunities for trade with Africa and the U.S. government's resources that are available to support them. Very soon, we'll have new members for President Biden's Advisory Council on Doing Business in Africa. And this is a council made up of senior executives from American companies. And we welcome the opportunity to plan engagements with the council, with your governments and private sectors. Shortly after the announcement of the new representatives, we hope to see them engage in a listening tour across Africa, because we know strengthening commercial partnerships requires all of us to work together. Before I conclude, I'd like to recognize the role of the Africa Exim Bank in bringing all of us together this week to further inter-African trade. Again, through the dismantling of trade barriers that disrupt the smooth flow of goods and services, we're going to be able to bring many more American companies into Africa to take advantage of the larger markets that the agreement will create. Again, I commend all of your efforts to recognize the excellence of U.S. businesses that we bring to Africa through the launch of the U.S. Business in Africa Awards. And I look forward to supporting you and the great work you are doing across the continent. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I can't be there today, but I look forward to hearing the rest of the speakers. Thanks so much.
And so we are very pleased to have with us as well, arguably the leading institution on the continent that is investing and facilitating investment in the continent's infrastructure, which is the African Development Bank. So I'd like to call up now to give his remarks, Mr. Jean-Guy Afrika, who is the Acting Director for Regional Integration for the African Development Bank.
It's a pleasure for me to be here with you all at the launch of this U.S. Business Awards in Africa initiative. It's a pleasure because I find the launch of this initiative quite timely. In early January 2021, the first shipments under the first shipments traded under the Africa Continental Free Trade Area left Ghana bound for Guinea and South Africa. Since its signing in March 2018, the rapid implementation of the agreement raises hopes of a more inclusive and prosperous future for the continent. How global trading partners, especially the US, support this project could set the tone for decades to come. It's surprising that such an initiative like the US Business Award comes just now, because as far back as 1957, Vice President Richard Nixon recommended to President Dwight Eisenhower that the United States government, through its agencies, should, as appropriate, draw attention of private American capital for investments in Africa where conditions are favorable. In the following 60 years, every US administration, Republican or Democrat, has echoed this sentiment. There have been programs to provide guarantees, equity, local currency loan, and investment advice to both US and African companies. So the Obama administration, for example, added to the suite of initiatives unveiling the Doing Business in Africa campaign, Power Africa, Trade Africa, while the Trump administration transformed the Overseas Private Investment Corporation into the DFC, began negotiations for a free trade agreement with Kenya, and launched Prosper Africa, a US government initiative that is fully supported by the African Development Bank and which, as was stated earlier, aims to increase trade and investments between the US and Africa. All these initiatives are embedded into our programs in the African Development Bank, so I felt it was important that I mentioned them. However, despite our massive efforts, US trade and investment with sub-Saharan Africa remains low. But although it's low, there's tangible evidence that indicates that thousands of American corporations are already operating on the continent. The trade relations between the US and South Africa, although somewhat of an outlier, highlights the tremendous potential that exists for more U.S.-Africa relations. South Africa is the largest U.S. partner with a total two-way trade that exceeds 14 billion, and approximately 662 companies are operating on the continent in South Africa as we speak. In health, countries such as Rwanda and Ghana are using American drone company Zipline to deliver in record time medication, blood, medical supplies to remote rural areas with limited road accessibility. These advancements, ladies and gentlemen, is only the beginning. African entrepreneurs are increasingly seeking partners to bring transformative businesses to life. Tech startup funding increased over 40% in 2020 to reach nearly $700 million in 2020. We need many more success stories. But before we can replicate the successes of the US and South Africa relation, there are some obstacles that we must overcome. I'll just highlight two. The infrastructure gap and risk perception. Africa's infrastructure gap, which we value at close to $80 billion, makes it very difficult to attract US investments. Whether for roads, for rail, for water, or for energy, Africa's gaps in infrastructure coverage are among the largest in the world. This adds to costs, decreases productivity, and undermines our efforts to boost investments. But interestingly, that same gap I talked about could also be turned into an investment opportunity. But for that to happen, the gap must be translated into bankable deals. Africa needs to mitigate the political risks, the currency risks, the regulatory risks around commercially viable opportunities to make them more attractive for investments. Less than 10% of infrastructure projects in Africa reach financial close. Most projects fail at feasibility studies. This is why at the bank we established a facility called the NEPAD Project, Infrastructure Project Preparation Facility, commonly known as NEPAD IPPF. And since inception, we've mobilized resources for project preparation that catalyzed infrastructure investments worth $24 billion or more. I think Prosper Africa has an arm dealing with similar activities that provide project preparation. Another challenge, and this kind of links to the event that we're holding today, is risk perception. You know, we must change the narrative on Africa and tackle preconceived notions that exist around the world about investing in Africa. We must be sector and country specific about the opportunities and better select the statistics and the stories and the images that resonate with US companies. While initiatives such as Prosper Africa and many of our own bank-funded initiatives such as the Africa Investment Forum, the NEPAD IPPF, and many more are doing a tremendous job to address the issue of risk perception, much more could be done. This is where initiatives like the US Business Awards are so important. There is no better way to sell the story about investing in Africa than by documenting and sharing the stories of successful US firms. Starting in August 2022, the Business Award will recognize exemplary companies, and we need many more initiatives. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to close with a look on the future. As Africa's economies and middle class continues to grow, there's tremendous market opportunities for American consumer goods. Consumer business spending is expected to top $6 trillion by 2030, up from $4 trillion in 2015. But Africa should not just be looked as a potential place for American consumer markets. It also has the potential to be a manufacturing center. Implementation of the AfCFTA alone is expected to double the size of Africa's manufacturing sector from 500 billion to nearly $1 trillion. So the launch of the AfCFTA has created a unique opportunity for us to deepen engagement, with the US across a range of sectors. Let us seize this opportunity and support these promising initiatives, such as the US Business Award, the programs in Wits, and the Center for American Studies. I thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
We've talked so much about our awards, but we thought that it would be useful at the launch of the awards appropriate to really unpack them in some degree. So the next two presentations that you will hear will be one via video from our co-chair, Dr. Mima Nedeljkovic, who is the chairman of Schaefer Africa. That will be first. And then we will have Professor Bob Wekesa, who's been the acting director of the African Center for the Study of the United States at University of Witwatersrand. He will talk to you in some depth about what we're trying to do and what our timelines are. So first you'll hear from Mima, then you'll hear from Bob.
I am Mima Nedeljkovic. I am the co-chair of the awards organizing committee. My day job, I'm the chairman of the Africa Global Schaefer Group that's now been operating over 50 years on the continent of Africa in the agro-industrial and renewable energy space. The purpose of U.S. Africa Business Awards is to celebrate the excellence of U.S. business practices on the continent. We want to be able to share the knowledge of those best practices for all future businesses coming into the continent. We want to very much strengthen the links between U.S. business and African business. The average American does not know of all the business opportunities going on the continent. That is the key part that we need to be able to demonstrate. We need to show that it's not just about business. Business is also commercial diplomacy. We need to know each other, not just politically, but also socially and also commercially. That is now a full relationship. And that's what Africa wants. They're looking for partnerships. They're looking for people that want to invest with them, partner with them for mutual growth. It's not only now about foreign investment and foreign companies coming into the continent. It's all about the African-born and bred businesses that are rising. They're growing, they're multiplying. They're hundreds, they're thousands now. Those are now good partners for Americans to be able to partner with. That's what we want to celebrate. That is exactly why we're doing the U.S. Africa Business Awards. And notice, it's awards not given in the U.S. It's awards given by the African Center for the Study of the U.S. That in itself is interesting, isn't it? Follow us as we go forward with this unique event. We want as many companies as possible to be applying for the awards so that we can select the best that are out there, that we can celebrate them, that we can then learn from their experience, so that now academics and business can interface, can come up with the best practices, so future companies investing will know how to do it on the basis of how past companies have done it.
I think, first of all, to start with, I wanted to just mention very briefly that this project started, the discussions leading to the initiation of this project started early last year, one fine afternoon in a meeting between myself, Professor Gilbert Khadiagala, and Michael. And I think it was motivated by the fact that there's many American companies plying their trade, doing business on the continent, but there's never been a recognition scheme, to recognize excellence by these companies. I think what we then undertook to do is the establishment of an organizing committee comprising representatives of private sector, industry that is. I think we couldn't hear our co-chair properly, but that's Dr. Mima Nedeljkovic, who is one of the co-chairs, founder member of Corporate Council on Africa, for instance. The other co-chair is a professor at Wits Business School, Professor Becky Moyo, who leads the Center for African Philanthropy. And so the committee, and I'm happy to note that in this room we have Mr. Ezekiel Odiogo. I think you can rise so that people see you. He's from African Development Bank, a committee member. We have Angela Russell, CEO of American Chamber of Commerce, committee member, and I think he will be speaking later. We have Michael Sudarkasa, who is a committee member, who will also be speaking, who is actually directing us today. The key touch points for this project are essentially three. One is that we want to identify recognize, and celebrate excelling American companies. The second touch point is that we want to produce knowledge, indeed, as Mr. Radebe was mentioning earlier, that it's not just a beauty pageant, it's not just celebrating an award, but we want to see what are the success factors that make some companies excel over others. And in fact, we'll also want to know why some of the companies that will be entering into the competition might not have actually succeeded, so that they learn. And so a critical point working with the Wits School of Business, particularly the Case Study Center, will be actually to produce those case studies to be used as teaching materials, to demonstrate role model companies and so forth. And lastly, this project also comes with what we are calling corporate ambassadorship or corporate diplomacy, if you wish, which is why, in fact, we're working very closely with the U.S. mission to South Africa, because we understand that American companies can actually be avenues for undertaking ambassadorship on the friendships, relations, interlinkages between Africans and Americans more broadly. The broad goal of this initiative is to create a culture of celebrating good corporate citizenship and positively exposing profitable U.S. companies and their contributions to Africa's economic development. The other major goal is we want to attempt to change the narrative of doing business in Africa. I think out there's the thought that doing business in Africa is a very difficult thing, and that Africans, as you heard earlier, are more interested in aid than trade. And actually that whole thing of Africa being ready for business, Africa being open for business, particularly from American companies, is a key goal. And so I think to go towards the end of my presentation, much of this information is available on our websites and so forth. But I just wanted to mention very quickly the key steps and the key dates that we have ahead of us. Now that we have launched this initiative, we are now going to establish a judging panel, a judging committee. Once we have that, the committee, the judging panel will then put together the criteria for judging the companies. We are going to undertake several launches, so that this launch in Durban is just one amongst many. We are going to, in short order, we're in fact working with Africa Development Bank. We shall be having a side activity in Abidjan during the African Investment Forum. And that's coming up between 1st and 3rd of December. We are going to have roadshows in Washington, D.C., for example, in New York, in Los Angeles, in Nairobi, in Lagos, in Cairo, in Kinshasa, that's DRC, and in Accra, so that American companies that are based in those various locations are aware, familiar, and on board, as it were. In February, towards the end of February 2022, 22nd February to be exact, we shall actually open the calls for entries. So there will be an advertisement out there, and we shall shout about this, working in proximity with the Wits Business School, to say now companies that want to showcase their good work in Africa actually, are being requested to make entries. And then at about 30th of June next year, in fact, on 30th of June next year, we shall come to the end of the judging process. And then on 18th of July, we shall then have some confidential communication to the winners to show that we have come to the end of the process, and the likelihood of a platinum, gold, silver, and bronze is as follows. That's when the announcement will be made. Then on the 25th of August, working with colleagues such as AmCham and so forth, we shall actually then come to the end of the process and announce the winners of the competition. And that will then lead us to the next next year's edition, the 2023 edition of all these. I think it would be remiss of me not to mention very quickly some of the partners that we're working with. And I think the key, as I mentioned earlier, we're working very closely with the American Chamber of Commerce, and Angela is here, but also with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and sometimes it can be confusing. There's American Chamber and there's a U.S. Chamber, which is based in Washington, D.C. Just yesterday, we entered a firm partnership with the Corporate Council on Africa, and we are very excited that now they are part of the committee, in fact, to be represented by the CEO. Obviously, we worked very closely with Ms. Griffin's office, the Regional Commercial Service Office, and the enthusiasm and energy from there, in fact, has been one of the factors that has spurred us forward. I think for those that I might not have mentioned, through the committee we have representation of Africa Development Bank, for example, representation from universities including University of Nairobi, Carleton University, the African Research Universities Alliance, and so forth. In a nutshell, this is about the initiative, and we'll be happy to provide further information one-on-one via email or via calls and so forth. Thank you very much and most welcome.
Whenever you attempt to award anyone or any group, it's important to have the support of that group. And so one of the first calls that we made in terms of putting together our committee was to the U.S. AmCham organization with the idea that we wanted to bounce the idea, really, off Angela. Do you think that this would make sense? Because Bob mentioned that this was the first awards. Well, AmCham awards its members. Corporate Council on Africa awards its members. What was novel about what we were undertaking is that this is a group of both Americans and Africans making an award. That's really the novelty of this. So I'd like to invite our co-committee member, Angela Russell, to come and just give her thoughts and comments on behalf of the U.S. businesses who are active on the continent.
So thank you very much, and it really is a pleasure to be here, and I must say it is a very exciting initiative, and absolutely, I remember the first call we had with Bob and Gilbert and Mr. Mbeki, so it really is a pleasure to be here and launching this today. So just to kind of give, AmCham is the collective, authentic voice of American business in South Africa. We have over 20 AmChams on the continent, and likewise they do business and represent the interests of those companies in their host country. And what we do is we ensure that we help facilitate the ease of business within those countries. But I think what's important, if you look at what the Economist said in about 2000, they referred to Africa as the hopeless continent. In 2011, 11 years on, they then referred to Africa as the rising continent. And in March 2013, they reported referring to Africa as the hopeful continent. So I think, really what Africa is Africa is a continent of opportunity. And what we see are resilient American companies who work on the African continent. They have been invested here for a number of years. And as I said, we have 662 American companies present in South Africa, with the aim partnering with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in America to actually make that number up to 1,000 in this country alone within the next couple of years. So we know that Africa does boast one of the fastest growing middle class populations, a very young and entrepreneurial population, and really we have promising growth trajectories. We are also starting to see those economic policies and business environments significantly improving, therefore making it an environment where investors potentially want to come through. So there is a lot of untapped potential for American companies to adapt and to create new business models providing inclusive opportunities within the African context. And there are many multinationals that are present here, and they, as I've said, they are definitely here for the long term. We know the role of business is to invest, it's to run operations, it's to generate returns for stakeholders, but it's also to employ local people. And what we need to see is an increase in foreign direct investment. To increase foreign direct investment, we actually have to help American businesses understand the complexities, the narratives, and the opportunities of the African market. And that is something that we do quite actively in partnership with the U.S. Chamber, speaking to various American entrepreneurs to attract them to this market. But I think what is important is what we're seeing now is America is actually the fourth largest investor in South Africa, trying to move that agenda forward. We are behind the UK, Germany, and Belgium. And the way, potentially some of the ways that we are doing this is with the Prosper Africa initiative. And like was said, you know, we are moving away from providing aid to encouraging trade. And therefore, what Prosper Africa does, it looks at focusing on improving trade and investment in sectors such as infrastructure, energy, climate solutions, as well as healthcare and technology. The intention is to focus on trade projects that also support women and small and medium enterprises in Africa. And the Prosper Africa initiative is part of a sustainable and reciprocal approach, looking at that bilateral investment into Africa, and is expected to lead a plethora of opportunities for investors in both the US as well as Africa. So, you know, US companies put back into their host countries, but it's also important for governments to make sure that the environments are enabling for investors to come through. So I think what is important, those public-private partnerships that we do are critical, but likewise we need to shift the psyche of the continent away from that aid to ensure that we are enabling trade for our own continent, and that we are deserving of the trade and the foreign direct investment that comes our way. So with that, hopefully, very short and sweet, and thank you very much. I'm very excited to be part of this initiative.
Thank you very much. As Bob mentioned, one of the earliest supporters of Access was the U.S. Embassy, and over the last 2-3 years, there's been quite a bit of work with the consulates around the country, and so we're very pleased here in Durban that as we chose to launch here, the consulate here and the Consul General was quite pleased to help. And so we'd like to ask Ms. Linnee, who's the U.S. Consul General Durban, to join us and give her remarks. Thank you.
Let me start by saying, you know, one of the challenges of always being one of the later remarks deliverers is everyone has said many of the things you were going to say. So I think I'm going to veer a little bit off topic here, which my team probably won't love. But first off, I want to welcome everyone to Durban. For those of you that haven't been here before, this is one of the premier conference facilities in Africa, and we're so excited. The city, the province have been thrilled that the conference was moved here. And it's been such an exciting time to see everyone coming together, particularly face to face. It's been a long 18 to 20 months that we've all been going through COVID. And I know that everyone in the room has probably faced some sort of loss or hardship over it. So thank you very much. I know a lot of people have traveled great distances, and distances that have become even more difficult to travel with limited flights and things like that. So a huge thank you on that front. I'm also excited to say that this is just the beginning of the building back from COVID. I think all of our countries, whether it's the United States, whether it's South Africa, where I'm lucky to be posted, or all of the countries where all of you come from, in business you recognize that every challenge also presents an opportunity. And I think there are amazing opportunities coming out of COVID. And I think in particular, one of the things that we're most excited about here, my team down at the Consulate and my larger team at the U.S. Embassy in Pretoria, our consulate in Johannesburg, Johannesburg. As a couple of our speakers have mentioned, we've got our regional commercial officer, Cynthia Griffin, who is coming from Pretoria. We've got our team from Prosper Africa. We've got my team from the Consulate. We're all very, very focused on how we can help all of the countries build back even better than before. And one of the ways that that's going to happen is through entrepreneurship. And Cynthia's going to talk in a minute, and she's going to talk on the much larger scale. My team here and many of our embassies and consulates throughout the continent, of which we have over 50, spend a lot of ways on thinking about how to bridge that gap between large business and small business. And so, for example, hopefully many of you were able to attend the event we hosted yesterday, a panel on agricultural youth entrepreneurship. This is an area we're passionate about here in South Africa. Agro-processing is a huge focus of the South African government, and in particular of the government of KwaZulu-Natal. And so one of the things we work to do is help young South African entrepreneurs build into the larger South African supply chain, but also with international American businesses and the ways that they're looking to grow their business. These are all opportunities that our teams across the continent are working on, and I encourage all of you, if you're not already in touch with your counterparts at our embassies and consulates in whatever country you're coming from, to please get to know them. I think another thing, building on what Angela was saying, is that so much of the work that the American companies are doing, they're looking for ways to improve access and improve the situation on the ground in many of the countries they're in. And oftentimes, one of the ways the embassy will get involved is large U.S. companies will come to the embassy to talk about their corporate social responsibility programs. They'll reach out to us and say, you know, we want to, for many of these huge multinational companies, as you know, it's a part of their mandate that they need to invest back. And we want to help steer them into programs that we know will benefit the local country economies based on the conversations we're having with the government. Cynthia and I in particular spend hours and hours attending meetings and conferences with the governments of the country we're in, and we know what their priorities are. And so we'll say, you know what, they're really focused, for example, on basic education and how do you increase basic education in a local community. And through that, we'll make suggestions to American companies. And so I encourage you, as you're interacting with our teams around the continent, to think about sharing that information with us, because I think that is a huge opportunity, and that gets to U.S. businesses in Africa and how they get to corporate excellence. In addition to growing business on both sides, as the colleague from the African Development Bank mentioned, it's over $40 billion in two-way trade every year. One of the things we're also looking to do is lift everyone up. We're looking for inclusive growth, which gets to what Maurice was talking about, the getting away from aid and moving into trade. So I think it's incumbent on all of us in this room to come together and find a way to increase trade, inclusive growth, and partnerships across the continent. And I think the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is a fantastic opportunity for that. I'm coming most recently from West Africa, where I was posted, where one of the biggest challenges was getting trade from one country to another. And that was oftentimes the driving factor for U.S. businesses on where they would look to invest and grow at what pace. And that gets to the importance of growing the infrastructure. So I think if we take anything away from it, from today, it's getting to know each other and getting to know what those opportunities out there are to help build the relationships. So with that, I won't take up too much of our time because I know we still have several more speakers, and Cynthia, I think, is going to talk in much greater specificity on some of our programs. So thank you very much.
I'm sure as you listen to all of the remarks that have been given, you definitely realize this is the beginning of what should be I'll say, even more dynamic relationship and partnership. So we're looking forward to working with everyone. We've mentioned, and it's been referred to multiple times by different speakers, that we thought that having the launch at the second Intra-African Trade Fair would be a very appropriate place. We thought about just AIF, which was the African Development Bank's event that's coming up in a few weeks. But we're very pleased to have the ability to engage with both of these dynamic continental institutions. And so I'd like to ask really our host for the morning and for our launch, the representative of the Afri-Exim Bank who's with us, Dr. Hippolyte Fofak, who's the Chief Economist and Director of Research and International Cooperation, to come and give his remarks.
And on behalf of President Benedict Rama, our president who could not be here, really, would like to really thank you for your support. And for us to be all here in the midst of the pandemic, it's a real testament of our collective commitment toward the transformation of African economies through trade, regional integrations, which are essentially successful and key to a successful implementations of the African Continental Free Trade Area agreements. IATF, Intra-African Trade Fair, which brings together buyers and sellers around the world to close the trade information gap and boost intra-African trade, is indeed an important piece of the AFCFTA implementation puzzle. So we are all here to make sure that this important initiative becomes a success. On behalf of President Rama, I would like to really thank Her Excellency, Ambassador Jessica Le Pen. I think she's been very supportive, quite frankly, and her shared visions and commitment to leverage Africa-US historical relationship, but also the power of US corporations to accelerate implementation of AFCFTA has been really paramount. I think each time we met with her in Addis, it's always been very enchanting to go back with a new mission when it comes to African development. I would like to really thank the organizer, not only for doing this during the IATF 2021, really for associating Afreximbank to the launch of the U.S. African Business Award. In our view, there's no better incentive for greater engagement than celebrating the success and showcasing opportunities which have been converted into successful deals and businesses. The California gold rush was an important moment that shifted the US migration patterns because it actually changed the life of those who made what was initially seen as a risky venture in positive, significant, but also invisible ways. We could see the change in their life. And by doing that in this particular context, in the AFCFTA context, in that re-engagement US corporation, through this award celebration, we will see US corporations which are actually making it, transcending that risk perception, as said earlier, into a growth pattern. And that will be an incentive to bring in more US corporations, which may be still sitting in the fences. In this regard, really, we welcome and would like to thank the organizer for this incentivizing award ceremony. I think over the years, the African Export-Import Bank has been working closely and emerging naturally as the gate to investing in Africa. We've been the gate for investing in Africa for many years. In that capacity, the bank has drawn on its convening power to leverage support of US corporate and sovereign entities, successfully working with them on several deals and projects. Under that partnership, for instance, the US EXIM has been one of the most important resilient bridge between Afreximbank and US corporations. In addition to a $50 million delegated authority facility that we received from US EXIM, more than a decade ago, we've worked with US EXIM in other financial institutions and some of the most important US-related transactions in critical trade-enabling infrastructure and sectors such as aviation, oil and gas, power sector. And key illustrations are the HSBC for TAC Angola, the airline in Angola, the AFC HSBC Union for an airline in Nigeria, as well as the Citibank JP Morgan UK for Kenya Airways, $1.9 billion at the time, was the largest deals ever undertaken on the continent. We've also worked with US EXIM on liquefied natural gas project in Mozambique. Under the leadership of Excellency Ambassador Le Pen, I think we've hosted US EXIM delegations led by Director Pryor in Cairo We did that right before the pandemic outbreak last year. And among other things, it was mentioned earlier, was how do we work together to ensure that Prosper Africa actually play a key role in further boosting trade investment initiative and deepen the relationship between Africa and the US. Indeed, I think we believe that Prosper Africa could be a major catalyst in a successful implementation of the AfCFTA, not least because it aimed to double the two-way trade and investment between the United States and Africa by providing a number of key incentive structure mechanisms. For instance, servicing that lower investment risk mentioned earlier, risk mitigations, connecting US to African firm. That firm-to-firm partnership is actually key for technology transfer, which is exactly what we need at this critical venture to change the structure of African economies and strengthening US trade investment hub. And we've also worked with other key partners besides US EXIM, most likely USDA, Department of Agriculture, as well as DFC, Development Finance Corporation, formerly HOPIC. And the bank has been working with US agriculture in several areas. I think most notably, we have a $175 million credit line from them, which has been very helpful. And we've also been renewed several times. And we are currently in discussion with them regarding the guarantee structure to support export of US to African buyers. We had initiated a partnership arrangement with Development Finance Corporation, DFC, where the bank could be a deal originator and bringing transaction to DFC for them to actually provide financing. We've actually signed an agreement with them and look forward, essentially, to drawing on that partnership to reinvigorate the trade investment relationship between African and US cooperation, especially within the AfCFTA era. We believe, I said earlier, that the AfCFTA, which established really on the largest single market in the world by membership, at least, with a combined GDP of 3.4 trillion, has been touted as a globalization game changer for a reason. It has a potential to transform African economy and boost both extra and intra-African trade significantly as more cooperation takes advantage of competitiveness and productivity gain associated with increasing economies of scale. And we have preliminary estimates showing that the potential impact will be significant. For instance, with intra-African trade doubling within the next decade. We also have estimates showing that combined consumer business and spending will actually exceed $6.7 trillion by 2030. These are significant opportunities for Africans and US cooperation to seize. But to take advantage of these emerging opportunities, a lot will have to be done in changing the nature and pattern of engagement between Africa and the rest of the world, as said earlier. And for instance, as mentioned in the opening remark, from exporter of primary commodities to exporter of processed manufactured goods. And this is very important because, as we all know, global trade is dominated by manufactured goods for almost 85%. So the only way and the best way for Africa to become a global partner is to enter that manufacture stream. I think US cooperation will play a major role, as they've always done in the past, to facilitate that. Another example, it will call for a shift in the compositions and patterns of investment, more toward industrial productions and development of regional value chains through the injection of patient capital. There's something we call vulture capital. It comes, take diamonds out, and we have to move away from that and go for the patient capital to make sure that Africa become fully part of the global economy. I think several governments and corporate entities are already taking advantage of the growth opportunity that the AFCFTA offers. We've witnessed that, especially in the automotive sector within this continent, the establishment of assembly line in Namibia, in Kenya. This tiny small economy, I suppose, in Kenya, in Rwanda, they are seeing Tanzania. In Namibia, they're seeing the southern market. So these are signs that really the AFCFTA is indeed the game changer that we've been talking about. The automotive sector is highly promising and growing industry within this continent, and which is home, as said earlier, of 17% of the world population, which is projected to double within the next few decades, and it will become a great market for the automotive industry. One of the major highlights of the 2021 editions of our Intra-African Trade Fair is the automotive industry. We have a lot of exhibits here this week for you to see, and the bank is working with key stakeholders around the world to create the right ecosystems for organic growth of that particular sector. At the same time, the development of regional value chains to deepen the process of economic integration through durable firm-to-firm relationships, U.S. and African firms provide the opportunity to sustainably expand the balance sheet of U.S. corporations and African corporations, while at the same time enhancing Africa integration into the global economy through the connections of African-based regional value chains into global value chains. I think this growth enhancing opportunity and development triggered by the AFCFTA also provide the path to reduce, it's good for the US for that matter, they provide a path to reducing the geographical concentration of global supply chains for greater resilience in the post-COVID. They provide a unique opportunity to reduce the persistent macroeconomic imbalances, which have been recurrent, but also a major risk to global financial stability. And to close, I think the African Export-Import Bank is actively supporting implementation of the AFCFTA, working closely with the African Union, the AFC Secretariat, and international partner. We welcome the presence here of Mrs. Angela Russell, the CEO of American Chamber of Commerce in South Africa. And really, it's very important to now work with you as potentially a great partner in that transformations. We are very much looking forward to working closely with your august institutions to ensure that US corporations, which have been major players in the process of economic transformations in other parts of the world, think of Europe, the Marshall Plant, and now in Asia through manufacturing transplant, we expect US corporate to play the same role in Africa in the AFCFTA era. And naturally, such a shift toward deepening trade investment relationship between Africa and the US for a win-win partnership that set the world on the path of global income convergence, the issue of poverty and will be erased gradually, will also intensify the competitions for US Business in Africa award. And while such a move will probably give more work to your committee, they may end up reviewing thousands of applications, we believe will be for good reason, a noble reason, in the sense that you're creating a globalization process that works for all. And I really wanted to close this opening remark formally launching a very important and timely initiative to reinvigorate the drive and contributions of US businesses to economic transformation in Africa with really a quote from one of our greatest, if not the greatest US president. And remember this, and I quote, "The best way to predict the future is to create it." The best way to predict the future is to create it. Abraham Lincoln once said. a growing and deepening partnership between the US and African corporate for a globalization process that achieves structural transformation under the AFCFTA is an important step in the creations of that brighter future of global income conversion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, and we definitely look forward to working very closely with AfriExim Bank and also African Development Bank. And I should note that when we were putting the program together, we realized toward the end that if we had everyone who was a partner, we would be going into the afternoon. So I do want, though, to recognize Mr. Joy Balipale from IDC, which is in Johannesburg, the Industrial Development Corporation, because they are also an important partner that we will be working with. I'd like to bring up Cynthia Griffin. Her name has been mentioned a number of times. She's our new Minister Counselor for Commercial Affairs, which is the Regional Senior Commercial Officer for Sub-Saharan Africa. She's been really a stalwart in a very short time, so we would like to have you come up and give our vote of thanks. Thank you.
And I really would like to thank all of you and all the partners for being with us this morning. I really want to recognize Wits University, the business school, and I look forward to speaking at the business school, as well as my colleagues from Prosper Africa. We're available to be, content providers for you at the business school and help students understand what it takes to work for U.S. companies. I'd like to recognize my AmCham colleague, Angela Russell, the African Development Bank, the Industrial Development Corporation, African Exim Bank, and my U.S. mission colleagues for making this launch possible today. As we've heard, this is just the beginning. This is the launch. This is an exciting time. And as you've heard from our Chargé d'Affaires, Todd Haskell, for America's most respected companies, profitability and doing the right thing go hand in hand. This means adhering to the law, operating in an ethical manner, practicing transparency, and having accountability to customers, shareholders, and society. It means holding high internal standards and compliance with regulatory and safety requirements so that customers and employees can have confidence in the effectiveness and quality of UX products and services. Individual American companies, much like the American brand, are defined not just by their products and services, but also by their strong business values and their culture. And through this award program, we look forward to seeing more about the outstanding corporate citizens that we have working here in Africa and the wealth that they bring to the communities in which they serve. So, on that note, again, I'd like to thank all of you for being with us today. And I'd also like to thank our moderator, Michael Sudarkasa, who's also the CEO of the Africa Business Group, who's also been instrumental in bringing U.S. companies to the continent of Africa. So again, this is just the start, and I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you.